If it ain't broke, don't fix it. If you broke it, you bought it. For the record, you can skip it. Now it's time for Vaguely Scientific. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. I am Derek. Magic mirror on the wall. Who's the scienciest of them all? It's Jim. Hi, Jim.
Don't take apples from old witch people that poisoned them, I guess.
That's a good point.
That's my mirror sageness coming through.
There we go. Our guest this week certainly knows the airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow. Welcome back, Marcus.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Yay.
I think it's 7 per second.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds...
Yeah, 7.
That sounds believable.
7? Yeah, 7 sounds right.
7 is usually the answer.
It's a very aerodynamic number.
Is it? I feel like 8 is a more aerodynamic number than 7.
Well, 7 looks a bit like a bird.
It's almost an arrow.
That's true. It's almost an arrow.
Yeah,
oh,
yeah.
Well, if a raindrop is like the most aerodynamic shape, I think maybe like a 6 or a 9 would be.
How about a ill-made boomerang?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Well, if you can't tell already, this is the show where we answer the most ridiculous audience-submitted questions in a manner that we like to call vaguely scientific. But before we do that, why don't we have Jim give us the fun science fact of the day?
Yeah, all right, sure. So, Fiestaware, the company that makes plates and dishes, used to make uranium-infused dishes. They're not much more radioactive than background levels, but they look really, really cool under a black light.
That's heavy duty.
Yeah.
Now, you say they used to make them, so they don't make them anymore.
No, but I guess people do try to track them down and collect them and stuff.
Okay, so was it a health thing that they stopped making them for? Because that's
yeah.
what I
My
wanted.
understanding was that they were like, maybe this isn't such a smooth, hot idea.
Okay.
Maybe they keep the food, too warm, so to speak.
Fair enough. Well, before we move on to our first question this week, we have some housekeeping to take care of. In episode 106, Akira versus Inspector Gadget, we talked about some of the different options of augmenting a human body with either cybernetics or genetic manipulation. We also explored how we might go about diverting the moon from a hypothetical collision with the Earth. Well, since recording that episode, there have been some new developments out in the world, and we've received word from Chris, who is currently fighting murder robots on the moon for reasons we know nothing about. So here's Chris's 2 cents.
Hey guys, Chris here. Currently trying to take back that moon base we don't have, and I just wanted to give you my 2 cents for episode 106. So, regarding the mechanical versus biological augmentation question, I have to bring up the example of Shadowrun. There's a statistic called essence, which is basically how well your soul is attached to your body. And when you enhance your body using cyberware or technology, or bioware, that is biological enhancements, you lose that essence. If your essence goes to 0, it starts at 6. Bad things happen. Look up cyber zombies for a good time. And you basically lose your PC. BioWare has less impact on the body, but it is more expensive. So there's your balancing point. Do you want a higher risk of cyberpsychosis? Or do you need to go on riskier jobs to earn the money to get those sweet higher reflexes? Kinda love this game, not gonna lie. Haven't played it in a while either. In fact, it's been 2 editions. Anyway, as far as the moon in Majora's Mask, I almost said the Terminus moon, which is a joke that only about a dozen or so people are gonna get. This didn't happen when you guys recorded the episode, but as of yesterday when I originally wrote this, NASA successfully tested basically what I can only describe as a mass driver. Yes, NASA chucked a satellite into an asteroid in order to test if that could be used as a defensive system for space debris. Now, I think I heard that it worked for an actual deflection because at the time the calculations were still being done, and I thought I heard it worked, but you may have to check me on that one. That's potentially an option. So if you want to deal with space debris. So basically what I'm trying to say is leave the nukes alone, Jim. That's my bit. Stole that from me 15 years ago. I was nuking everything in sight while you were still in high school, boy. Although, if you get the chance, send one of those 2 nukes up here to the moon base that we definitely don't have. These cutlasses just aren't cutting it. Pun fully intended.
So that was interesting.
Yeah, I think it's really neat that we get to include the stuff about the DART satellite crashing into an asteroid because she's right. It didn't happen when we recorded that episode. So,
yeah, we should have waited.
Yeah, apparently.
With everything all squared away, it seems it's probably time to move on to the first question for the week. So question 1 this week comes to us from Christy. Lava or magma is just liquid rock. When you look at a video of lava and remind yourself that it is just liquid rock, it seems a lot stranger all of a sudden. What other science-y / nature things function similarly when broken down this way?
I got something in a similar vein. And this is something that I still get very perplexed by. And that is ice. Not like regular Earth ice, but when ice gets to be extremely cold, its properties change. I mean, apparently there are like 18 different kinds of ice, and it all depends on like the pressures and the temperatures and things like that. But I always think of the ice on like Pluto or outer moons, like in that neighborhood, where the ice is so hard that and like so frozen that it just turns into a rock. And it's like hard like a rock, and it forms mountains and valleys and weird things like that. And it's hard for me to imagine when I look at a picture of Pluto. It's like, oh yeah, these mountains are just ice, just water ice.
So I took this to mean a little bit like there are kind of intricacies to things that we maybe take for granted a little bit when we look at the whole that is made up of the parts.
Yeah.
I guess the first thing, and this is a little inspired by Pluto, I guess, but the first thing that comes to my mind is just like the construction of the planet. Like if you think of it as a big giant rock.
Yeah.
But there's like plate tectonics, and like the world is always like shifting around and changing shape. So that's kind of hard to wrap my head around, I guess.
I watched a documentary that I thought was really interesting about like plate tectonics and the movement of continents and things like that. And they were explaining how, like, you know, the crust is like 10 to 14 miles thick, various places around the world. But the continents themselves have sort of like these deep roots that go down through the crust and into the mantle. So, and then the mantle itself is kind of solid, but it's not because it's hot. So it's like a weird plasticky, resiny, like almost like tree sap consistency, except extremely hot and dense. And if you try to, you know, well, that's volcanoes. It explodes out of the ground because it's bad. But it's weird to think about the inside of our planet because we're in a nice, comfortable place and the inside is just a mess.
It seems like pretty much anything that acts as a fluid, but so slow to be imperceptible, is strange to think about. Where it's like, even something as routine for our lives as glass, you tell a child that that's liquid, or not liquid, it's fluid. One, they learn the difference between those two words. And two, like, you can just point to evidence of this in ways that can really distort stuff. Like, I've not personally experienced this, but I recall hearing about like stained glass in very, very old buildings where the bottom part of the glass is noticeably thicker than the part at the top.
Oh,
and it's explained by it's been around long enough that gravity is able to flow the glass down so it actually starts accumulating toward the bottom.
I
might be
didn't know
getting
that.
the ideas wrong, but the idea of glass, it is fluid, basically. It's just very, very slow. Like, one thing I heard is that, like, glass is it's neither really a liquid or a solid. I think the term I've heard used is amorphous solid. Something that's kind of between the two that helps kind of add glass's liquid-like fluidity to things that are fully solid, like, rocks.
Glass is weird.
If I could add to that, actually, that reminds me of the, I think it's just called the pitch experiment, where they made this thing that's kind of like an hourglass, and they threw a bunch of tar in the top about 100 and some years ago, and they wanted to see how long it would take the tar to go from the top to the bottom, and it's just still going. Like like a drop. I mean, that's like a big drop. It's like a golf ball sized drop, but like it drips every few years, or maybe even like 10 years or something between. Like, it was a big deal that a drip had dropped a few years ago, I remember.
Isn't that how, like, stalactites form over a very long period of time?
True, yeah. That confuses me, because you would think that, because, like, they form because, like, the water drop has minerals in it, and the water drop falls and hits the floor. You would think that when the water drop splats, the minerals would go with it, and it would just go, but I guess not.
Nope. I mean, not all of them, anyway.
Before we leave planets too far behind, I did want to mention that, like, the insides of gas giants are even weirder than the insides of, like, a rocky planet, because there are ideas that, like, Jupiter, for example, it can rain diamonds there because it's just so hot and there's so much pressure that carbon can form droplets, and, like, crystalline droplets, and that's weird for starters. There is metallic hydrogen inside of Jupiter. For those of you keeping score at home, hydrogen's not a metal. It may be in the first row of the periodic table, but it generally is not considered a metal. It does not have the properties of a metal unless you crush it so hard that it becomes able to conduct electricity. That's a sentence that I said, and it's scientifically correct, but I can't wrap my head around it.
Weird.
Imagine being able to crush something so hard that it spontaneously can now conduct electricity.
I don't know enough about how electricity works to, like, really
it's fair.
Figure that out, but...
Now that you mention it, that's also a bit weird. We all just sort of take for granted that electrons will flow in a direction, and don't stop to think much about all of the weird quantum stuff that must be going on down there.
Yeah, because they have to be passing through, like, copper wire is a solid thing that energy is passing through, and...
Oh, now it's getting weirder, because,
A lot of things kind of change at scale. Like, even something is super common, like, think about how water behaves differently if you were 100th the size. Like, a drop of water would, I don't know, be more like a slime creature than it is at our scale. Like, you get stuck to it, you'd float in it in a weird, different way. Yeah. It would just be a very different creature.
Water bugs can stand on it.
Well, speaking of bugs, one of the things that I thought of when we bring up scale, when we bring up, like, being very small, is I've been interested lately in macro photography, which is taking pictures of very little things. Like very small things in big detail. And, like, so it's really interesting to see macro photography of, like, plant spores or insects or things, because you can see all these, like, little details and all the basically the mechanics of how a bug's eye works. And it's fascinating to, like, see if something were that big, it would be so complex, but it can't be that big. So it's like working on a clock, it's like all these tiny little pieces.
Little hairs that are so small we would never see them, but they're hyper relevant if you zoom in enough. Like a fly's legs, I think, have little hairs on them, which makes sense. They help grip things. You're like, oh, well, I would never be able to see that at my scale.
A lot of bugs have hair. and you don't think about it.
That reminds me, there is a microscopic wasp, and I just looked it up. It is 200 micrometers, so 1/125th of an inch. 1/5 of a millimeter. You might be able to see it. 1/5 of a millimeter. Maybe it's not like microscopic, but like a wasp that's 1/5 of a millimeter. That's like a multicellular animal that can fly. That is a wasp. It's weird.
There is a very small insect. It's in the plant hopper variety, and the scientific name for it is the Issus coleoptratus, if I'm pronouncing that anywhere near correctly. And I learned about this kind of recently, but it is, as far as we know, one of the only examples in nature of gears.
Oh, interesting.
Their legs function by like a gear network. And partly I think it's because they're so small that like they're able to, I don't know, they're able to built differently. But so it's like, that's because gears we think of as like strictly mechanical, like strictly man-made things, and there is an example of it in nature.
That's so cool.
They're tiny. They're like super tiny.
Yeah, but even then, yeah.
That reminds me of like single-celled organisms, because you look at a single-celled organism under a microscope and you're like, yeah, that's alive. Sure, I can accept that. But then you think about it a little bit too hard and you're like, but how does it think? How does it know?
How does it know?
And the answer probably is it doesn't really.
Yeah, it doesn't.
But it's hard to wrap my head around it. At least it's hard to wrap my head around the idea that like these little single-celled organisms are living their life. Some of them are hunting and like attacking prey. That's weird.
Well, it's hard to wrap, like, even biologists today, like, we don't really have a good explanation. Like, we have some explanation, but not an entire explanation for how instinct drives animals to do things that are just their natural inclinations. Like birds, there are birds that are parasitic birds that will lay their eggs in other nests, in other birds' nests. And when those eggs hatch, they just know either to blend in with the other birds or to kick the other birds out of the nest so that the mother bird will feed them. And then when they grow up, they learn to kick foreign eggs out of their own nests. And it's like nobody's teaching these birds anything. They are born and they just start doing this.
The brood parasites. I think cuckoos are one of them.
Cuckoos are one of them.
Yeah. Oh, man.
So if you heard the name cuckoo and you thought, I don't trust it, that was a good instinct.
Yeah. Can I very briefly talk about like eyebrow mites?
Sure.
I know a lot of people don't like the idea of like the little mites that live in our skin and like feed on our dead skin cells and stuff. Fair. You know what? That's totally valid. They are super important. They're symbiotic with us. But like there's a whole universe on our body, and it's something that like the eyebrow mite thing, we'll never, ever, ever think about that. And so it's just so weird to imagine that, like, there's a whole universe on our skin that is just happening completely unaware of us. Oh,
yeah. We are a flaky, dusty, oily, delicious thing that's walking around, and other things take advantage of it.
It's interesting that you use the word universe, because this kind of will lead into something I wanted to say. But we can start with like the quantum realm from like Ant-Man.
Oh, yeah.
And how that makes like scientifically very little sense. But the idea that if you get so small that you're like dealing with molecules and gravity will kind of stop acting the way that you think it does. So that idea. And so this is kind of a loose tangent onto a thing I wanted to say, so one of my favorite, like, I don't know if I would call it a genre, but like one of my favorite themes in fiction that you see occasionally, but I don't think is as popular as it should be, is the tiny world kind of environment. Like, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, or like Mouse Guard, or something like Tom Thumb or Thumbelina, where like it's a tiny person in a natural world and like they're the size of mice or something. But I was thinking about Honey, I Shrunk the Kids and how they run into an ant that is like bigger than them in that movie. And they're like small enough to walk on a blade of grass. And I was thinking about how gravity is not proportional to us, I guess. Like gravity is constant. So if like an ant falls off of a table and it's like 3 feet off of the air, but like if you look at how small that ant is relative to us, that would be like falling off of a cliff. But if we were actually that small, it wouldn't be like falling off of a cliff. Of course, we don't have an exoskeleton, so we still probably would die, but I don't know. I think that's weird how the world would change so drastically if we were at that scale.
I mean, if you think about it, I mean, it's like maybe I'm wrong about this, but I would think it'd be like a force equals mass times acceleration thing. Like if you have way less mass, you're going to hit the ground with way less force.
Yeah.
I could be wrong about that. And plus I would think there'd be more air resistance because you're smaller.
Probably. And like the smaller you get, like if you got as small as like a speck of dust, then you could just be carried around in a breeze.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, air is thick down there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's thick with 2 C's.
I mean, at some point, if you get small enough, breathing ceases to make sense.
Oh, yeah.
Well, we talked about bugs they don't have lungs. They just have tubes that take oxygen directly to their organs. Like that,
The other one that I thought was really interesting was like, if you were to shrink down to the size of molecules, there is like the oxygen you need is a molecule. So how's that getting into you?
Well, that's why I said that like the quantum realm in the MCU, like the explanation that Ant-Man gives, at least in the comics, is that he compresses his atoms together. So he just gets like insanely more dense. But like, how then is he sitting next to other atoms?
Yeah.
Like, atoms have a finite size.
I mean, he's got a spacesuit. Maybe he's got like an oxygen tank that he shrank down with him or something. And the oxygen is also small.
But he's made of atoms. Those atoms should not be able to get smaller, or there's like nuclear repercussions. I don't know.
Derek.
What?
It no makes sense. And that's fine.
It's fine. It is fine, but
him and his tiny wasps can be around and do whatever they do in that movie. I haven't seen it. But the microscopic wasp, now I understand why that's in that movie title.
Oh.
That's not why. It might be why. But I'm pretty sure that's not why.
It might be why that the wasp is named the Wasp.
I think I'm going to be wrong, but someone can correct me. But I'm pretty sure there's just a lady who flies, and that's why there's a wasp, and that's it.
Yeah, that's probably right.
That's the end of the explanation.
Yep, she flies and she's little.
Yeah, that's it.
And wasp. Yep.
Why not be littler? All right, There you go.
Why not be littler?
The one other thing that I really wanted to mention was stars, because it's not even that like stars are weird because they do fusion and they're like super hot and there's atomic reactions and whatnot.
Stars are weird.
They are, but that's fine. I can get beyond that. But the idea that the sun is 93 million miles away and it is so ludicrously powerful that it is keeping our planet at this temperature, like the sun is so hot that 93 million miles away, there's a place where water is water and not frozen solid. That's weird to me. And in a slightly similar vein, stars give off so much energy that you can see them from trillions of miles away, quadrillions of miles away, or more. Because if you build a telescope, you can see light from across the entire universe, and that's wild.
But it takes like 8 minutes for light to get from the sun to the Earth.
Yeah, that's how far away.
That's weird too, right?
Yeah.
So here's a question that has nothing to do with anything, but I just thought of it. So there is a theoretical lowest temperature, which is 0 Kelvin, right?
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a theoretical highest temperature?
Oh, I need to know this.
I didn't know if you would know this.
No. I can't verify this because I'm a dum-dum. But I think I watched a Vsauce episode that went into that.
Oh,
I wanna
okay,
say
interesting.
It mentioned that theoretically there is no cap. Although, once the number gets high enough, it gets
doesn't matter.
weird. Yeah, it just gets, like, extra weird.
This is very funny. This is the this website. This is from Nova, but is there an opposite to absolute zero, like absolute hot? That's a great name for it. So there's something. I'm just reading this in real time. So there's something that they say called the Planck temperature, which is a temperature at which, if you go higher than that, unknown things begin to happen.
Unknown things.
Yeah. It sounds like it'd be related to the Planck distance, wherein by anything smaller no longer fits in the model.
Right,
Oh.
and there's also Planck time. This is Max Planck. It's actually Planck, I think. I don't know.
Yes, yeah, it is.
Max Planck got a lot of stuff named after him. Good for him.
He didn't get the smoot named after him.
The thing that I would think is that, like, because temperature is just based on, like, the movement of molecules. So I would think there'd be a temperature at which molecules would just stop being a whole. They would just obliterate themselves. Maybe. I don't know. That's why there's, like, 3 different temperatures for hottest temperature on this. Oh, there's 4. Wait, what? Hold on. Number 4 is 0 Kelvin. That doesn't make sense.
Can you incinerate things on an atomic level? That's the question.
But yeah, I mean, it's weird to think about the idea that there could be a temperature where atoms just cease to exist. But maybe there's not. Maybe it is infinite.
I mean,
Maybe
even if
it's
that's the
infinite.
case, like, if you have a box, and you can always put a little bit more energy into it. It doesn't matter what's in the box, the temperature's still going up, right? So
It's true.
At some point the word temperature becomes inadequate. I think it's probably the answer.
We're getting dangerously close to talking about quantum mechanics, so maybe we should move on.
The speed of light is also a weird thing. I just want to throw that right there.
Relatively. Like, because people are at Taurus. I still remember that one. Well, I don't know if we really answered the question or not, but that's okay. Let us know. In the meantime, we have another question to maybe answer. And question 2 this week comes to us from Daniel. You are stranded on a strange planet. It has a tolerable atmosphere. What 5 items did you bring with you?
A spaceship.
The first thing I was going to say was spaceship. And I was going to even elaborate to say a spaceship capable of getting me home.
Yeah.
And like with all the snarky bits attached, like a spaceship I know how to operate that is capable and fully fueled, and that's one object.
It's starting to remind me of Pikmin, and I don't know why.
I never played Pikmin.
Because the spaceship in Pikmin is basically 30 separate objects.
Oh, okay.
It's actually very Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, actually.
Yeah, actually.
I've heard that, and I just didn't have any Nintendo consoles growing up or anything, so most of those IPs I'm not familiar with.
That's fair.
But yeah, this question I think requires further parameters.
Yeah, because what is tolerable?
What is tolerable? Oh, I didn't think we were going to talk about that parameter. Tolerable meaning you are capable of tolerating it, but it's unpleasant?
Yeah,
or tolerable
that's my
meaning.
thought.
Oh, okay.
Well, I shouldn't say that's my thought, but I'm like, because technically, like, 40 degrees Fahrenheit is tolerable, but if you're out in 40-degree temperatures for I don't know, 3 months without any kind of protection. Even 3 months sounds high. Eventually, 40 degrees Fahrenheit is probably going to get you worn down.
Well, I think there isn't really going to be one ideal condition that you'll just be comfortable in forever.
Mm-hmm.
Like, even if you're somebody who likes the heat, which I don't, but if you're somebody who likes hot weather, you're eventually going to get overheated.
Yeah.
And if you're somebody who likes cold weather, you're eventually going to get hypothermia.
If you could be on this planet and it is exactly 76 degrees Fahrenheit, I think I could stomach that for the entirety of my life.
Do I have an air conditioner? Because that's a little too warm for me.
So I guess also it's important to note that tolerable is subjective.
Yeah.
I suppose we could break it into 2 different broad categories. Easy time, hard time.
Easy time, hard time.
So the question as written says you are stranded.
Mm-hmm.
So
okay.
No, you can't have a ship with full capability of getting you out of it because then you
But
are not
you
stranded.
could bring 5 items.
You're just waiting around instead of leaving. But like the whole tolerable thing, I feel like one could just be, basically ideal, but you're just stuck there.
Mm-hmm.
And the other one is, it's hard, but you're all around. So,
yeah.
But what would help it to be easier?
So important question then. Is there an implied rule here that the 5 items you bring cannot stop you from having the stranded condition? Like,
I think so, yes.
Is that a requirement? Okay.
Yes,
I didn't
because
think
then you
of
wouldn't
it
be
that
stranded.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I don't like this question.
It's not a pleasant situation.
Yeah. I don't want to be stranded anywhere. I don't want to be stranded at the mall.
Perhaps the easier
true.
question or the easier variation might be the hard situation. It's tolerable, but sucks.
Mm-hmm.
So, but you're otherwise, capable of survival. But what would you take to make it something horrible be all right?
A Wilson volleyball.
Right.
Now, why is that?
So you don't go mad.
So that when I go mad, I have a friend.
Yeah.
Now, when you say that, do you mean specifically a Wilson volleyball? Or are you meaning that to be a generic thing I talk to not go crazy?
Oh.
No, it has to be a Wilson volleyball.
Okay.
Otherwise, the reference is lost.
Right. I think one thing that we should maybe agree on, and that's why I'm bringing it up so we can or not, is that by tolerable atmosphere, I think it implies that it is breathable at the very least.
Yes.
That's what I assumed. It meant you could survive in it. Like you could live in it.
But maybe like in the bad situation, it's sort of like you can technically breathe high up on a mountain, but it ain't pleasant.
Right. So maybe you need to bring an oxygen tank.
Yeah. I was reading about 0% humidity.
Okay.
And it turns out you can actually be just fine in 0% humidity as long as you stay well hydrated. So I would be done. I would sinus headache myself to death immediately on a 0% humidity planet. I mean, people live in a lot of weird places on our planet. Things like places that are extremely hot, extremely cold, high altitudes, low altitudes. So, I mean, by the definitions we're coming up with, Earth isn't always exactly tolerable.
I mean, you can be stranded at places on Earth, like you mentioned. Like, depending on the situation, being stranded at the mall could be a horrible experience, depending on a lot of things. So,
is there air? You don't know.
Is there air? You don't know. All of the follow-up thoughts I have about this question are just like, how much can I get away with not actually giving an answer to it, which is amusing me.
Yeah.
Because again, being snarky, like, oh, do I know I'm going to be stranded? Otherwise, why did I prepare these 5 items? But like, that does lead me to a more valid response, I guess, which is, how long am I going to be there? Is it just for the rest of my life? Because then that changes some of the things I might want to bring. Like, I'm going to bring more tools.
Yeah.
Versus if I'm going to be there maybe for a couple days, I want to bring enough food for a couple days.
Yeah, if you're going to be there the rest of your life, bringing food is going to be wildly impractical. So even if you're going to be there a couple months, I don't know if that would be long enough to grow your own food. So
Sure.
it would point to you have to like hope that this planet has something edible.
Yeah. Well, and then that leads to if it is undetermined how long I'm going to be there, then I'm going to start thinking, okay, what are the most useful items for the sake of perhaps flagging down a rescue?
Oh, yeah.
And that leads me back to how close can I get to just having a spaceship? Because again, like if I'm necessarily stranded, then I guess I can't get off of the island.
Yeah. So a radio.
A radio.
I think you're trying to spit out radio.
I'm not trying this, but that is one option. But I'm saying like I'm deconstructing the question and being pedantic about it.
Reach out.
Well, I'm saying if you have a radio is a way you could theoretically get off the planet, but so is a spaceship. That's sort of my argument. Like
So I would say a radio is a way to get off the planet, but it's not going to guarantee that you can just do it at will. Okay. So I think that counts as still being stranded. Because, like, you know, Gilligan's Island, they had plenty of different ways they could communicate with the outside world, and inevitably somehow something bad would happen. So
I think I have a more maybe fatalistic view of the question, where I think I'm going to assume that I am stranded forever and will never be found ever again. I'm on my own. That's it, period. So what would I want on hand to not go crazy?
Yes.
Or to ease... practical tools would be specific to the location. If you're on a grassy... like, you won't know what tools will be useful in certain things outside of maybe, like, a knife is probably good. But I can't help... There's probably a better version of this answer, but I can't escape the simple idea of just having a 52-card deck of cards. That just seems practical and, like, I don't know, a safe bet. Yeah. Because you can come up with pretty much infinite versions of that, of games with that, or ways to entertain yourself. Sure, you might lose the seven of hearts in a storm or something, but whatever. Solitaire gets a little easier, I guess.
Yeah.
Or harder, depending on how you want the rule to be that day.
I actually got a book that is like 600 solitaire variants, and you can do an infinite number of different things with a deck of cards.
Because, like, I mean, you could make facsimile versions of them. But, like, you can make a dice out of something there for sure.
Yeah.
Cards a little harder.
I mean, when you think about it, like, if you're there for an appreciable amount of time, I don't know why. Since I mentioned Gilligan's Island, that was actually sort of where I came at this question from. Was like, if you're on a planet for 3 years or more, I think Gilligan's Island, like I don't want to throw around the word canon too heavily with Gilligan's Island, but I think they were supposed to be on that island for 15 years because they made a movie that, like, they got rescued or whatever. So,
oh, really? I didn't know that.
So they were on the island for 15 years, I think, is the canon answer to that. But that's way too long to have food or water. So you have to have those things. You have to be able to source those things locally. If there's no water on the planet, if you're like on Tatooine or something, well, hold on, because Tatooine does have water because you have to use the moisture evaporators. But you have to figure out how to get these things locally, whether it's digging a well, whether it's doing the thing with, like, you know, condensation and leaves and have the leaves drip into the hole and whatever. But so those are some things I think we can immediately discount.
Sure. And there's an important difference between this question saying strange planet versus desert island. Because we have this specification. It has a tolerable atmosphere. And you know, that's open to discussion what that actually means. But there's no guarantee that there is a food source. Yeah. So you could, even if you say I brought tools to hunt or cultivate crops or something, what if those are useless? Yeah. And then you're just there, you might as well just kill time until you starve to death at that point.
I think that some of the really slick multi-tools that I see would be like something like that would be nice to have because, I mean, in a lot of ways, you're going to have situations where you need a knife or you need like a pair of scissors or a pair of pliers or something like that. It's always going to be like a small thing that you need.
Yeah.
You won't need a bottle opener. I would not expect, but I think a multi-tool would be a good thing.
If you have a knife, you could probably open a bottle with it. So
that's true.
Well, so that's interesting because I was thinking of Castaway. I was thinking of what are the challenges that Tom Hanks's character in Castaway ran into, and what are objects that I would like to have. Now, this is keeping in mind he's there for at least 3 years. I don't remember how long he's on that island, but if you have something like a lighter to start fire with, that's going to be a really helpful thing for a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
And so that leads me to the next, like, if I'm thinking of tools, which I think would be the first thing I'd start with, I'm going to think of kind of simple tools that would not. So like maybe a flint, like a fire starting thing rather than a lighter so less modern luxury, I guess.
Yeah. It's interesting because like we also have to consider, is there anything to burn? Because like if it's all just rocks or something like that, then you're really not going to be able to start a fire anyway.
Well, if
or
you
just
can,
little things. Is there wind? Because then maybe you need shelter.
If you can breathe, there must be plant life.
Oh, that's a really good point. Because oxygen is not stable. So for there to be oxygen, something's got to be making it.
I don't know. If you find plant life, you're not going to be too far away from something that you can eat.
Well, it doesn't have to be plant life that's making it. It could be something extremely different that's like, I mean, humans can eat a lot of weird stuff.
True.
Shout out on a stromatolite.
Just you eat rocks.
Yeah. But I mean, I think to Marcus's point, though, I think it's probably worthwhile to have maybe a shovel that you can use to build a shelter of some sort, whether it's like a little dugout that you can carve into like a hillside, or if you could pile up dirt into like a hobbit mound,
a hobbit hole.
Another thing that's maybe not the worst idea is like if you had more clothes and could dress it like in layers. Now, if it's a warm place, you wouldn't need that, but I mean, having extra layers or extra clothes even
something as simple as a needle and thread could go a long way.
Oh, that's true. That actually might be a way better idea.
Well, there's a lot of stuff, like the more you're wearing, the more odds and ends you have to draw from if you need to like MacGyver something.
Yeah.
So like, I don't know.
Yeah. But also like if you're able to, with like a needle and thread, you can repair your stuff, but you can also source things locally if there's something to source.
Wear rocks.
Yeah.
You find the most luxurious and satin-like rocks, and you just kind of,
only the
fashion
finest of pumice.
It's a Lady Gaga concert.
Or like that one Bjork music video where she's made of rocks.
Well, there you go. You could be made of rocks.
Yeah, you could be Bjork.
You could be Bjork stranded on a planet.
Iceland is a strange planet.
That's true. Oh, also, if you have a shovel, you can try to dig a well.
True. So,
Shovels are
there's
very
water,
underrated.
Yeah.
Shovels are a handy tool. You could hit attacking monsters with them.
You could hit friends with them.
You could hit friends with them. Never hit your grandma with a shovel. That's
A pang sound is always hilarious. Very versatile.
So the real answer, or it's not even an answer, but the like if somebody were to ask me this and say you're not allowed to make jokes, because that's what I've been doing. My actual response is a non-answer, which is it just depends on so many things. I don't know.
The other problem is that you can bring all kinds of different stuff with you, but you have to know how to survive in the wilderness.
Yeah.
And like I can say all day, oh, I'll dig a hole and find water. I won't. I'll die very quickly.
Very quick.
I don't know how to survive in the wild.
Can one of the things that I bring be a person? Because then my answer is Bear Grylls.
Can I bring Bear Grylls?
Yeah. Bear Grylls, if you want to be on the show, let us know.
Yeah. So actually, I wanted to mention, this question reminded me a lot of a NASA worksheet that I have encountered several times in my life. And it's always very interesting every time I come across it. It is a list of 15 objects. You are stuck on the moon. So the premise of this exercise is that you are 200 miles away from your rendezvous point for the return trip. And so you have these 15 items, and you are to rank them from most important to least important, which things you think you would want to bring with you on this 200-mile trip. So I'm gonna read through this list. I'm gonna put the link to this in the show notes. It's just a little like 1-page list here, but I'll read the list off so that everyone can hear it. And then I would like to talk a little bit about it because I think at least Marcus might have already filled this out. So.
Yes.
So we have a box of matches, food concentrate, 50 feet of nylon rope, parachute silk, a portable heating unit, 2 .45 caliber pistols, 1 case of dehydrated milk, 2 100-pound tanks of oxygen, a stellar map, self-inflating life raft, magnetic compass, 20 liters of water, signal flares, first aid kit including injection needle, and a solar-powered FM receiver transmitter. And keep in mind, this is on the moon, so there is not a tolerable atmosphere, but I think it's a very similar style of question.
Yeah, and it gives you more parameters, though. So I did not have a chance to like really read over this before we started recording. I know Marcus did, but so that's kind of, I don't have as much to say, so I want to say before.
I think it's worth mentioning there is a correct answer that NASA has attached to this worksheet.
Yeah, I didn't understand that. So like when I just read over the items without the context, like without the prompt, I kind of skimmed through it and I was like, okay, so probably pretty high on the list might be water. But now that I'm like thinking about it with that in mind, that might actually be lower on the list. And so that's, because you're on the moon.
I calculated that into mine, and it is not number one.
Yeah. Well, that's, so that's why the whole scenario matters.
If we want, I could read off mine, and then you could just correct me or give opinions. I don't know. Say mine, well, Derek inputs, and then Jim, you say the right answer.
Yes. And I want to mention that the answer key has NASA's reasoning behind where it falls on the list.
Cool.
So,
excellent.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, listeners, if you want to do this exercise on your own, maybe stop the episode and come back after you've done it, and you can be wrong with us together, because I've done this worksheet like 4 different times in my life, and I've never gotten it correct. So,
I've gotten every one of these wrong for sure.
You would think after doing it more than once.
Well, yeah, I would hope so.
Yeah, but I've not gotten it like 100% correct. Like every time I think I do a little better because I've multiple times, but
yeah, I'm reasonably confident with the top 5.
Okay.
From there on, I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, how about this? I'll read off what I have my top 3.
Okay.
In order, and then Derek, you can tell me why I'm wrong, and then Jim will tell us why we are wrong.
I'm not going to tell you you're wrong. You're probably going to do it better than me.
We can talk it through, because, again, I didn't spend a lot of time.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I looked at the list. I considered it. So, number 1, I'm pretty confident that 2 100-pound tanks of oxygen should probably be there.
Okay.
Because if you don't have that, I think you're dead pretty much immediately.
I like that. That's a good...
Now, granted, where you start might have oxygen, I guess.
You're in spacesuits, I assume.
Yeah, but even those have not a lot of oxygen.
Right.
So I put that as number 1.
And you do have to go 200 miles, so...
Yeah. Then I put number 2 as 20 liters of water.
Okay.
And then number 3, I actually put the portable heating unit.
Ah, interesting.
That is interesting. I could
so
see
that's
that.
the top 3. What are your thoughts on that, Derek?
The only one Like, I'm honestly thinking water might be lower for me just because. I mean, I don't know how spacesuits work. I don't know how easily it would be to consume the water in this scenario. I guess that's the big reason.
I guess I'm considering the fact that it is 200 miles.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So even by foot, it would take a really long time for me to traverse 200 miles. And I'm guessing in a spacesuit with low gravity, it would take longer.
Okay.
So I'm thinking that you're absolutely going to have to drink water at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Okay.
And that is, I put the water higher above food for that reason. You can go longer without food than without water. So
Right.
that's why I put the heating unit as number 3 and not food.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're going to have to spend overnight on the moon, and moon cold.
Yeah.
Cold.
Moon cold.
So that I am guessing will kill you before not having, a sandwich. But again, I don't know. But that goes in the next 4. It's kind of where I'm like, or next 3. I don't know. 4, I put food. Food concentrated,
Okay.
number 4.
Okay.
Number 5, I put the solar-powered FM receiver transmitter.
Okay.
Because you need to talk to people.
Sounds good.
To communicate with home. Because, I don't know, maybe they can do something. And then number 6, I put the first aid kit. Which I think might, depending on your right situation, maybe should be number 1. I don't know. But, I figure, that's kind of where...
I mean, to be fair, if you suffocate to death, you won't have time to administer first aid.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, if you're on the moon, how much first aid can you administer without breaking the seal of the space? The moon scares me. That's all.
Well, yeah.
Let me know when you want me to start listing answers here.
Well, for pretty much the rest of it, it could interchange. I have some other ones I could just pull out that I'm have thoughts on that feel like might be red herrings.
I want to say that the 45 caliber pistols and a parachute are low.
Yeah, I put the parachute silk as 14 and 15 as the pistols.
Okay.
Oh, it's parachute
That's what
silk.
I'd
It's
put.
not, okay.
Yeah, if only for the material worth. I don't know. You can patch something. I don't
Pistols
know.
are last. That's the
There's
only
no
one I'm
atmosphere,
certain of.
So they're not parachuting anywhere.
Right. Good luck without air.
So maybe you could just point out some that I want to get Derek's input, because maybe I'm just straight up wrong on a factual basis with some of these. The magnetic compass. I'm pretty sure the moon doesn't have a magnetic field, right?
I didn't know enough about that one.
So I don't think it would do jack. I don't think. Maybe I'm wrong. I put that as 13 for no real reason other than I think this is worthless.
There's also a self-inflating life raft, which I could see uses for.
Yeah, that strikes me as a shelter. I put that at 11, but actually I'm thinking that maybe should be way higher.
More than 45 caliber pistols. That's all. I'm certain that's last. That's all.
Mm-hmm.
Derek, what's with the milk?
It's dehydrated.
But why milk? You have food and you have water. Why would you need milk?
Well, milk has... Did you know...
Is there a reason?
I don't know. This is dehydrated milk, but this is a random off-topic
milk,
thing. Did you know that...
An explosive I'm not aware of?
Milk is actually better at hydrating people than water is, because your body takes longer to process the proteins in it. But I don't know that applies to this. It just is true of drinking a gallon of milk on Earth.
I see.
I put signal flares at 7, and I think the way signal flares work would still work on the moon. Ooh. I think the light would go off. I don't know if they would hang in the air, though. That's where I don't.
Do they need oxygen
about
to
how
burn?
signal flares work? I thought it was a chemical reaction, but maybe
I think it depends on the signal flare, but I think a lot of them have oxidizer in them.
Okay.
Yeah, because that's why I put box of matches at 12. I don't know, because I don't think that's particularly useful, but maybe I'm wrong. Stellar map I put as 8.
I'm having so much fun listening to this because I have the answer keys.
I'm sure I'm way wrong, but the stellar map, I'm struggling to think of I feel like the radio would, if you can just talk to people, I don't know.
Solar powered FM receiver. I assume that means you're communicating with your crew, but I don't know.
Yeah, I guess I just don't really have a great sense of how difficult wayfinding would be on the moon? Probably hard, but I don't know. Like, would looking at the star map? I guess it would be helpful, but it'd be more helpful than the compass, I think. Because I don't think, again, I'm assuming the compass doesn't work. Maybe I'll be wrong. But yeah, I don't really have any thoughts on the other ones. Like, I rope at 10. I guess it would be useful for us to tie each other together so we don't float into space. I don't know.
Drag someone along by their ankle.
Yes, if you need to drag someone, the rope will be useful. Or drag supplies, frankly.
Oh, true, yeah.
Now that I think about that, that actually might go a long way. So, Jim, how horribly am I wrong?
Yeah, how wrong are we?
You're not, like, intensely wrong on most things, and there were a couple that you were extremely wrong on, which is really interesting to me. And they are mistakes that I made the last time I did this, which was a couple months ago.
Tell me why milk is number one.
So
dehydrated milk is number one.
No, number one is the oxygen. You nailed that one.
Okay.
The note that it has here in the corner of this, on the moon, each tank would only weigh 17 pounds, so it wouldn't be that hard to carry them.
Oh, yeah.
You got number 2 dead on again. Number 2 was the 20 liters of water. You're walking 200 miles, so you're going to get thirsty.
Okay.
Number 3 was actually the stellar map.
Okay.
And this says primary means of navigation because star patterns are essentially identical on the Earth and the Moon. So your map is fine. It's compatible.
That makes sense.
And you were correct. I'm going to jump to number 14 here, which is the magnetic compass. The Moon doesn't have a magnetic field that has like a north and south pole. So
Right, okay.
yeah, so that one was way at the bottom, number 14.
Yeah.
Number 4 you also got correct, which was the food concentrate.
Okay. Yeah.
Number 5 you also got right, the solar-powered FM receiver transmitter.
All right, I'm feeling all right with 4 of the top 5. I'm
Yeah.
okay with that. That's kind of, yeah, all right.
But it's worth noting, it says for the because you talked about this, and the FM transmitter, it says for communicating with the mothership, but FM requires line of sight transmission and can only be used over short ranges. So if you think about like an FM radio station, you have to be, within its little bubble to hear it.
Right.
So that's why you'd still need the map to navigate.
That makes sense.
Mhm.
Okay, good point. Yeah.
Number 6 was the nylon rope, good for scaling cliffs and tying injured people together. Number 7, first aid kit. I guess that spacesuits have apertures for needles and things like that. You can stick them through. So, number 8, parachute silk. This was listed as protecting you from the sun's rays. You can throw it over you, so you.
That's the shelter one then.
Yeah. Number 9 was the self-inflating life raft. And this was specifically the CO2 bottle could be used to launch yourself a long distance and go flying through the air, basically.
Tricky.
Oh, weird.
That was
Okay, yeah.
Number 10 was the signal flares. When you spot the mothership, you can fire a signal flare. Number 11 was the 2 45 caliber pistols. Like the life raft, you could shoot it and go flying through the air several feet and save yourself some effort. Number 12 was the case of dehydrated milk. It just says bulkier duplication of food concentrate. So there's that would be kind of useless. Number 13 is the portable heating unit. It says not needed unless you're on the dark side of the moon. And in the prompt, it specifically says you are on the lighted side of the moon.
Oh, right. Yeah, I forgot that it's entirely locked. Right. It doesn't. That wouldn't change over the day. Right.
I am 95% sure every time I've done this, I've done the exact same thing and put that right up in the top 5.
I just forgot that, that doesn't change on the moon.
Yeah, it's actually quite hot on the daytime side of the moon. So. Magnetic compass was 14. We talked about that. And then number 15 is box of matches because there's no oxygen on the moon, so you can't light them. Yeah. So, if you want to do your scores, people at home, and I don't know if Marcus wants to do this right now, but you can do it later. The way that it is scored is you find the difference between your answer and the correct answer. If it's 0 to 25, you've done excellent. 26 to 32 is good. 33 to 45 is average. 46 to 55 is fair. 56 to 70 is poor. Suggests use of earthbound logic. And 71 to 112 is very poor. You're one of the casualties of the space program.
Woo! Hi. I don't want to go to space, so I'm okay with this.
So I will put that in the show notes, though. I'll put the version that has the answer key. So everyone can do it. But Yeah, I think that's a fun little exercise that it just reminded me so much of this question, even though the parameters were somewhat different.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Listeners, let us know, how you scored.
Yeah.
Because this was fun, and I don't know Moon. Jim,
There it
do we
is.
have
I
any...
see it out my window.
Oh, I can't see it from here. Jim, do we have any listener mail this week?
We do, and as always, if you want to send us listener mail, you can email us at feedback@vaguelyscientific.com. You can comment on our blog, you can like us on Facebook, you can tweet @vaguelysci. And this email comes to us from Carbohydrate, and as in regards to episode 80, Turbo Teen. Remember him?
I remember that episode.
Yeah. And Carbohydrate says, I remember Turbo Teen and My Mother the Car. Which is more unpleasant to think about? Who can say?
Turbo Teen has the body horror element to it.
Yeah. Although, I don't know how I feel about, like, the antics that a car mother could get up to.
Well, that's just, like, ghostly possession of that's just a haunting.
Yeah. I don't know
That's
if I
not
want to be
scary.
haunted, like, in my car.
By your mother.
Yeah. I mean, I like my mom, but, like, in my car, I just want to, like, commute,
Just gonna get a new car.
Maybe there's a listener out there whose mother is named Christine, and now they have a new nightmare for tonight.
See? That's the
Oh.
scary bit.
Ha Well, thank you very much for that listener mail. And if you have a question that needs to be answered in a vaguely scientific manner, you can email us at questions@vaguelyscientific.com. If you want to get our episodes the minute that they're released, you can subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and all the other great places that podcasts like to hang out. And subscribing and leaving feedback really helps us out, and so does telling your friends.
And if you tell your friends, then they can listen and send us more questions, and then you can hear questions that your friends sent us.
Yeah. Or you can send us questions too, and you can hear your own questions.
And tell your friends that you sent, and they can hear your question. It's a whole social engagement thing.
Yeah. And don't forget to check out our merch store over at vaguelyscientific.threadless.com. I mean, that's a great way to support the show for starters, but also it's the holiday season, and it's a great way to support your friends to get them Vaguely Scientific merch, because, I don't know, people will like you for doing that to them.
Absolutely. And
For doing that to them.
For doing that to them. We'll like you for doing that to them.
Yeah, yeah.
Because
Correct.
you'll support. Yep. Oh. So thank you to Marcus for being our guest this week.
Thanks for having me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Always a pleasure. Well, for Vaguely Scientific, I am Derek.
I'm Jim.
And I'm Marcus.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Don't die on the moon.
Please don't die on the moon.
You will die on the moon.
Yeah.
Don't go to the moon.
Yeah.
Pay no attention to the man behind the counter. Nope. Can't read. Can't read my own words.